Gami, aka Gami Noggles, welcome to the podcast, season 7. Thanks for being on, man. What's going on?
Hey, Adam, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Been looking forward to this one for a long time.
I'm super excited to have you on. Probably one of the episodes that I was looking forward to the most in the season, simply because of all the chaos and commotion you guys have caused around the Nouns brand across crypto Twitter. But I won't do the reveal. I would love for you to introduce yourself. Who are you, Gami? What does the world need to know about you? We'll start there, and then we'll work our way forward.
For sure, yeah. I'm Gami. I'm from NounsDAO, the founder of NounsDAO, and a couple of other things. For the Americans listening, it's Gnars, like gnarly, not Nas the rapper. So just an accent. But yeah, I'm a builder in the space. Been in crypto since 2016, full-time since 2017, and just one of the most nouns-pilled people on the planet.
That's for sure. I would definitely say that you're one of the biggest proponents for nouns that I've seen outside of the co-creators themselves. I think a good place to start, Gami, you've really centered your entire life online around nouns and the nouns ecosystem. Beyond the financial incentive that comes with owning a nouns and participating in the community, why are you so aligned with the nouns vision, the nouns brand, and everything that sort of you do for the community?
Yeah, I guess there's a bit of a technical reason that's probably worth bringing up, and it's in all the years that I've been in crypto, which is sort of 6 or 7 years, every day just full on barrage of information, super ADHD. Nouns was just like a welcome change of pace, slowing down the community building to, one NFT per day was just a really refreshing change. And then as I dug deeper, it's just got everything that I needed to do what I want to do. And the people that it's attracted are very much aligned with the things that I'm passionate about. So philosophical and technical reasons, but yeah, I'm just very nounish.
Okay, so walk me more through your passions, because you're very vocal about skateboarding. That's a big part of who you are, your brand. Any other passions? I'd love for you to list them out.
Yeah, the list of passions are huge. I'm one of these people that gets really obsessed with things and then like goes super deep and, at the expense of everything else in my life, probably. But yeah, I grew up in like a tiny little mining town, 2,000 people. So there was literally nothing to do. And then at the end of primary school, we raised a bunch of money through the council initiative that was in place, and we built a skate park, and it was life-changing. Like in terms of having something to do, connecting with people, having something to be excited about, and like content to seek out at the town library when I'd go on the internet, downloading photos off dial-up and ordering magazines in from out of town. And at the same time, I was playing high-level squash as a junior. So that's a racket sport in a court, similar to tennis, but you hit a small rubber ball against the wall. And so sport's always been a big passion of mine. And in terms of like creative endeavors, skateboarding was kind of the perfect mashup of arts, culture, sport, and just the general vibes of sort of going against the grain and wanting to make our own rules and express ourselves in different ways. So skateboarding's definitely become a big part of my life, and it's very fitting that I would buy the first skateboarding noun, first skateboard head anyway.
I'm curious, how do you see the intersection of skateboarding culture and the world of crypto sort of overlapping? What are the similarities and even differences?
Yeah, it's a good question. The main thing that comes to mind is like this whole middle fingers up mentality towards the establishment. This is something that you see in skateboarding throughout history. And it's because I look at skateboarders as artists, and they're people who are expressing themselves in a very pure manner. They're moving their body, they're using the world around them, and they're combining those things into like this incredibly beautiful to watch and technically amazing self-expression. And I think there's a very similar vibe in crypto, where it's people who are sort of on the fringe, maybe they don't fit in with the normal sort of crowd, and they end up gathering in these communities of people who share their sort of ethos about the world, whether that's like, you know, hoping for a better way of doing things, or it's just specifically more about the technical side. There are always these analogies with skateboarding that make sense, you know, right from going out with your friends and hitting a spot and persisting until you show your friends what you can do, or even just appreciating the technicality of skateboarding around how this special design by Rodney Mullen enabled hundreds of different tricks to be invented. And that's just one other thing where there's, you know, a close affinity with crypto is this basically environment that's just perfect for experimentation and pushing the boundaries.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where amateur is 1 and 10 is professional, where would you say you lie on the spectrum as a skateboarder?
0.5. I know that's under 1.
So that tells me you embrace more the culture than the actual skill set. Although I feel like you're maybe being humble here, because in our pre-interview questions, and when we were just shooting the shit, you're very down to earth. So I don't know what to believe here.
Yeah, I'm not like a superstar skateboarder. I've been on the cover of a magazine and on the poster of a magazine, local one in Australia.
Pretty legit.
It was probably more to do with my cultural contributions than my skill. But I used to race downhill and skate street and park, and I basically combined all of those into my own sort of discipline on a skateboard. I combine, you know, your usual flip tricks and grinds with styles like dancing and downhill racing. And to me, it's just like the perfect way to get around a city, because like no matter what obstacles in front of you, you can find a way around it or over it. And so I've sort of used my passion for skating and my ability to bring people together to build communities. So I guess in terms of 1 to 10 for skating, technically, probably, to be honest, maybe around a 4, because there's some amazing skateboarders out there. But in terms of like my cultural, you know, appreciation and relevance, maybe more like a 7 or an 8. But
okay,
yeah.
Okay,
it's that's not modest either. That's pretty high, I think.
No, I'll take it. I'll take it. What was your cultural contribution that got you on the front cover of the magazine?
Yeah, so back in, I think, 2010, 2011, I'd started a Facebook group, which was, you know, I haven't had Facebook in years, but it was basically a place where I'd gathered a bunch of the kids in my community. I was living in the city by that point, so it's a lot bigger than a 2,000 people mining town. But I found that there are a lot of kids who were really passionate about the content and then about creating content from their own skateboarding endeavors. And we gathered these people into a Facebook group. It grew really quickly to 5,000 people and then further. And we started hosting these huge events where we would raise money for charity. And this huge flood hit the city that I was living in, and it destroyed like a bunch of homes. And, you know, it was basically all over the national news for a good couple of weeks. And as a community, we basically did this flood relief event, and we raised a bunch of money and did a lot of good for the local skaters to show that, you know, they're not riffraff and troublemakers. And in the process, downhill was really popular at the time. So like my kind of skating was, you know, pretty cool in the eyes of the kids, which was cool for me because I never really fit in at like the skate park with the purely technical or pool skaters. So we sort of had this event and a few others happen afterwards, and then a few injuries happened where kids were doing these really high speed slides down mountains and they'd come off and just get absolutely wrecked. And so I made it my mission to make wearing helmets cool, and somehow we pulled that off. So it was something to do with that sort of cultural impact that the producers of the magazine were interested.
I feel like it's very analogous to your role in the Nouns community. It's very much creating cultural impact, similar to how you made the front cover of the magazine for inspiring people to wear helmets. Is very similar, I feel like, to putting the noggles in that local city. What city was it?
Yeah, that was actually in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil.
In Rio,
crazy one.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of similarities between like finding your role in a community, right, and what value you bring and how you kind of like propagate whatever it is that you're trying to do in that community. For you, it was wearing helmets. In this example, it's proliferating the meme of the now, right? The noggles, which we'll get to in a little bit. I remember seeing that online, and that always standing out to me as like one of the coolest crypto collabs to date, where nobody really knew it was crypto, but there was so much crypto involved underneath the hood from a cultural perspective. Yet integrating that object into that environment gave it new life. We'll get into it in a minute. It's just a teaser for everybody that's listening. Just a teaser. I don't want to jump into it just yet. But okay, so that makes sense. You're obsessed with skateboarding. You're this really cool guy from Australia. You've been skateboarding, I think you told me offline, for 25 years, right?
Yeah, 25 years skating. My body's starting to pay for it.
You got funding. Got it. You got funding from the school. So where does crypto come in? How did you come across crypto? And more specifically, what was your first interaction in the crypto world?
Yeah, the story of crypto is sort of in two parts. One that's very personal, but I'll touch on it a little bit. And the other side was just purely professional. So in my previous life, I was working in engineering at a firm that specialized in distributed energy systems. So sort of think like, control systems for switching electricity and providing renewables and all this sort of, cutting edge stuff back then. And basically I'd been married and divorced really young, a long-term relationship. And then it basically didn't last a month after the wedding. And sort of went into a pretty, deep bout of sort of depressive behavior. So part of that was, trying to find myself, traveling, financial problems, all the things that come with a life-altering experience. And had some other things that had all sort of bubbled up at the same time, and just, started exploring my own being and my conscious mind some more, and then sort of went down the path of using psychedelic drugs. And in the process of doing that, obviously ended up on the dark web, because as a techie, I'd already heard plenty about it. And it was at that point that Bitcoin became obvious. And then I read the white paper and I took it into my work. And this was early, but I didn't have like an investor mindset. So it was like 2014 or something. And just, I was aware of it, but I didn't really fully understand like the economic impact. I just thought, wow, this is really cool. Like they can't stop me from buying the drugs. And, I've met a lot of people that were introduced to crypto through that same means. And it's just because like the Silk Road and everything that followed it were huge success in terms of product market fit. There were tens of thousands of people, using this stuff. And so having that background in these like distributed control systems and that sort of engineering understanding, it clicked with me. And I guess like as soon as it did, I just got really obsessed once I figured out a way that I could get involved. And that was in 2016, where I started contributing to some different projects, just various, tooling, couple of like early coins, couple of different communities, and just really trying to learn. And basically did that unpaid for a couple of years. And, you'd get a few shit coins here and there for remuneration, but to be honest, most of them just went to zero. So then that obsession just continued to grow. And it was in 2017 that I came across CryptoKitties. And as someone who's very creative, but not really like a financial person, like still to this day, I don't really understand most stuff in DeFi, but I definitely understand culture. And discovering CryptoKitties and looking back on some emails from Coinbase back when I was sending myself ETH to a MetaMask to play around with that, it's like really quite a nostalgic time. So stoked that I found CryptoKitties.
That is pretty nostalgic. One thing that stood out to me in what you were saying is this psychedelic journey that you went on, and then how that sort of helped you stumble upon the dark web, and then the whole crypto rabbit hole kind of kicked in from there. Quick side tangent. What's it like going through a psychedelic journey?
Well, there's a couple of experiences I've had where I felt like I lived an entire life, and then I was transported back like when I woke up. And I've experimented reasonably extensively because of some friends that I had who were experienced, and then like more from the theoretical standpoint, there's a psychiatrist and also founder of a crypto brokerage in Australia, Dr. Prash Puspanathan, and he used to go to Bitcoin conferences and stuff and speak on the topic of psychedelics. And I actually remember watching him do a talk in Australia, like I think it was in 2018, about psychedelics and Satoshis. And so he does all this research into like psilocybin use and how that can help with the number of different problems we have, psychologically as humans. And just, it was one of these other things where I just couldn't ignore like the serendipitous experience of encountering someone like that, but also the fact that he'd seen all these sort of parallels between his previous life and his new life, and then brought them together. And so that's kind of like a bit of a metaphor for my experience with psychedelics. Is it's like it's allowed me to see different connections that I didn't realize before. And it's just because like you get outside yourself for a while and you question things in a really different way. And if it's done in the right environment, like I'm not advocating for everyone to just like go out and do drugs, but if you have the right people around you that can help you with that kind of experience, it's really worthwhile.
Are there any core principles or sort of values that have developed as a result of going through these psychedelic experiences that you live by? And if so, how does that affect your time in crypto?
Yeah, that's really interesting because like my entrepreneurial experience has also been really rocky, like my life. So like when I was like 18, I got a patent for this idea and developed it through to where it could, be created into some software and all that sort of stuff. And iPhones weren't out or popularized at that point. So we were looking at things like Palm PDAs for basically this idea that I had. And through assuming things and just like making assumptions, I got wrecked like multiple times. Like people took advantage of, what I was working on, or we didn't see eye to eye, or I just sort of was completely, not misled, but just like misguided at my own accord. So that combined with like getting a fresh perspective on things has really helped me to live by this mantra of like assume nothing, because when you do, you're generally wrong. And the fact is we're surrounded by loads of data, and like plug to your own product, Bello. There's just so much data around, and it's readily available and quite often free. And yet in crypto, we're in this like, don't trust, verify world. And yet it astounds me how much people assume. There's just wild assumptions happening all around us. And I feel like to be contrarian and find opportunities like in crypto, whether it's as a builder or an investor or whatever it is you're doing, one of the best ways to be contrarian is to just actually look at the data, because most people don't, and they don't look at like data from different perspectives as well. Like an example is people love to post like charts that show the relative search volume of different keywords on Google. But there's way more interesting uses of that data. So you could put in a seed keyword into like Google AdWords Planner and get hundreds of other relative keywords and paint a picture of like a market and understand like, okay, how are people thinking about this thing as opposed to how many are thinking about this thing? And yeah, for me, that's just been like the best way to find contrarian opportunities. And I live by that mantra now. So very handy.
So there's two things I want to touch on. I want to see how that relates to your sort of entrance into NounsDAO. But even before we go into that, you brought up a good point. Despite how much data there is out there, people still tend to trust versus verify. And wouldn't you argue that that's just human nature to trust? Those are the systems that we're used to. And are we really at fault for continuously trusting because that's maybe what we're akin to? It's what we know. It's what we feel comfortable with. This whole concept of verify, is relatively new. We've never really had that at the scale that we have right now.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And most people do have good intentions. But as we've seen in the space, many do not as well. Like lots of people trusted SBF, and then he couldn't really be trusted, So I think it's really like, it's less about the trust part of the equation and just more about the verify. Like, I don't think it's a, binary trust or verify. I think it's like this spectrum of like, where does someone sit when you receive information from them? Like, and it's always healthy to sit somewhere in the middle and give people benefit of the doubt, but also have healthy skepticism that you can apply and use your own unique way of looking at things. And that avoids like the group think and sort of like the sheep or herd mentality where you can sort of go your own way. And I think that's something that gets missed a lot in crypto, is like a lot of people are just copying each other. And while I'm like a huge proponent of remix culture, because like that's literally what I do all the time, I think that remixing brings like innovation and creative advancements that might be impossible otherwise. So I just think it's somewhere in the middle. It's real fence sitter of an answer, but it is what it is.
That makes sense. So in that transition to NounsDAO, because I want to spend the next half of the conversation sort of talking about IP, CCO, NarsDAO, and everything in between. When did you actually officially join NounsDAO? What was the date? You remember?
Yeah, it was the 27th of January, 2022. So in 2 days, it'll be 1 year anniversary.
Okay. All right.
And it's gone very fast.
Kululu, congratulations. That's great. Okay. So you said earlier when you go into things, you don't really go into it with expectations, right? My original question as a follow-up was, what was your initial goal getting into Nouns? But now I'm understanding that there was no goal. It was just sort of like buying this thing. It was cool, culturally relevant, and just let's see what happens. Was that your mentality at the time, or am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, like alluding to the earlier question around, gaining new perspectives through experimentation and whether that was with like psychedelics or work. I definitely saw it as a similar opportunity because I'd already had like the idea for Gnars, and then I just took that whole mentality of, looking for a serendipity machine, which is like, I saw the opportunity to purchase a noun that aligned with what I'm passionate about. And so it was like a great opportunity to, create a new identity that is focused on building a certain thing. And that was really inspiring to see 4156 having done that with his ape punk, before Nouns. And then I guess I just really saw that it was like the best example of a serendipity machine in crypto. And what I mean by that is just you take the plunge and then, you open your eyes and you start to see things differently. And that was really obvious to me with Nouns because of the founding team, the environment in which it was founded, the sort of remixing of different protocols and tools that resulted in Nouns as a protocol. And then just the really obvious meme around the glasses, you put them on and then you see the world differently. And so it was a gut feel, to be honest.
How do you see the world when you put on the Nouns glasses?
That's a deep question because we talk about this sort of stuff all the time. But I like to really I like to keep things in threes because I like numerology, and it's just like easier for me to visualize. But when I think of nouns and the number three, nouns are literally people, places, and things. And so I realized that the combination of people, places, and things is what brings us the magic that we see in the world today. So, for example, with skateboarding or any action sport, the secret sauce to making history as, a creator in the space or an athlete or however you're contributing is to find your people, explore new places and do your thing. And it's literally just this combination where it brings out the best in people because you're surrounding yourself with the people that, you align with. And then just like travel is really important as a young person. I think it's also important to the work you do and to experience new cultures. And then I think in terms of doing your thing, it's just this matter of like being unapologetically yourself and being as authentic as you want to be. And I think pushing the limits as much as you can. So I kind of meandered from the question, but it's it's philosophical for me, and it's kind of hard to define, to be honest, how I see it, the world with the noggles, the Nouns glasses on, but it's definitely a combination of things, and it's just very inspiring above all else.
How would you say that compares to the other Nouner visions?
As in like other noun owners that are participating in the space?
Right.
I think bit of a hot take, but there's sort of two camps in nouns. There's, people who are coming at it more from a financial primitive in sort of, looking at it in similar ways to DeFi protocols. And then there's the camp that I'm part of, which is more from the builder perspective, which is leaning into this sort of idea of serendipity being where the magic happens. And I think you see that in the way that we all interact and vote, that we have very different motivators behind the decisions that we're making. And I really think they're both important equally, because, without a friction, there's no spark. So somewhere in the middle, which is the proposals and the voting that takes place, that's where the real innovation happens. And that's where like a lot of the greatest ideas come from. So, So yeah, I hope it stays that way. It's important.
Mm. Are there any proposals you've regretted passing, like voted on yes?
Yeah, early on, I won't name them individually, but early on, I was really lost with like how to vote, because some there's just so much information and so many different factors. And as someone who's like assumed nothing, I would spend so much time like putting the thought into my vote, and then I'd just be like, okay, well, there's no time left for anything else today. So then I started to follow the herd a little bit, and I would find like Nouners who had like less on the go. Well, you know, it looked that way, that they had less on the go, and I'd pay close attention to their votes, and that would help me decide. And now it's kind of just like a mix of having a feel for what the ecosystem's about. And you see that like with people who've just joined Nouns, like they find it to be quite overwhelming because they're like, how do I do all this? There's voting on Prop House and NounsDAO proposals, and there's discussions everywhere, and it's a bit crazy. But I think that everyone sort of finds their own niche within the Nouniverse, you know, per se. So it's yeah, I've regretted maybe a quarter of the votes that I made, and not because I thought vehemently that they were wrong or they should have been different, but just because I know that I wasn't in the right headspace to even make the right decision.
With Nouns in its current state, if you could change one thing about it, what would it be?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think like the biggest problem we have is, well, I previously thought that it was capital allocation. So I thought, you know, we need to be entirely focused on getting the funds into the hands of people with niche expertise. And while I still believe that, because that's part of why Gnars exists, I also believe very firmly that we have a problem with coordination around promotional effort. So say we allocate funding and we do all these projects and people build amazing things. The attention marketplace is really fractured. So like any given day, there's dozens of things happening in Nouns that are newsworthy, you know, like whether it's an advancement in training AI models by the Nouns AI crew, or it's like some breakthrough protocol idea or some, you know, governance experiment or whatever. There's just loads of cool stuff. And then even the flashy marketing stuff, you know, there's just so many cool things. And at the moment, our attention is just like fractured across all these different things. And if we could coordinate that attention and just really focus it behind one thing each day, I think we'd go a lot further. And then that would also help us understand our communications much better, because, you know, like I said before, if we're making assumptions and we're not, you know, getting a good data set to make some decisions, we're essentially making assumptions anyway. So there's a few things that I've been working on with a couple of developers in the Nouns ecosystem, and I'd love to be able to help solve those kinds of problems. So yeah, I tweeted out an idea of Nouner News the other day. A lot of people mistook that as a newsletter, but it's actually a clone of Hacker News, which is a Y Combinator incubated project, and it's kind of like a launch pad where every day people, you know, curate the top news piece, and then sort of most of the attention is drawn to that top piece. So I think yeah, we could learn from that.
In what ways do you believe decentralization of power and decision making in the NounsDAO aligns with your personal beliefs and values?
Yeah, that's another one that I need to think about. You know, it's like, in terms of my personal beliefs, like I just get really frustrated with bureaucracy, And while a lot of people might look at nouns and be like, wow, that's so bureaucratic, like bunch of like, people with ETH, swinging their things around and making, decisions and trying to dictate what happens, blah, blah, blah. But if you compare it to like how we live our real lives, I'm much more in favor of something where everyone has equal opportunity to have a voice. And so that's why governance experiments are really interesting to me. Australia is a great place to live, but it's government, waste a lot of money. They take incredibly long time to pass important new legislation. They have a really poor network of support for entrepreneurs and startups. It's incredibly hard to get capital here. And there's generally not a lot of support for entrepreneurs in general. And I guess when you look at something like Nouns, it's just this level playing field where it is what you make it. And it has so many faults and so many things are wrong with it. But the fact that it provides this like opportunity for autonomy, and autonomy as in self-directing freedom, I think is what really stands out to me. So to me, it's, you go out and you skate and it's this sense of freedom. And I think that's the part about Nouns that aligns closely with my values.
So let me re-ask a question that I asked just earlier. With Nouns in its current state, okay, what do you think there's one thing that Nouns does really, really well that if you could pour more money into it and amplify, what is that one thing?
I think Nouns is doing a really good job of creating useful tooling that other communities could benefit from. These often get talked about as public goods, or if you read Jacob Horn's stuff from Zora, he speaks on hyperstructures, or public infrastructure in general. And I think like Nouns has done a really great job with things like Prop House, the simple innovation of using NFTs for governance instead of ERC20s, when they forked Compound to create our DAO executor. There's loads of stuff like that that's just very thoughtful. And I think it's thoughtful because everything's slowed down. So even though Nouns only took a few months from idea to execution and launch, it was one of these serendipitous things where like the thoughtfulness that went into it is something that's pretty hard to replicate. So I just think like the best opportunity that Nouns has to give a, positive, to give back to the space is to create this opportunity where we can show the outside world that we're not a bunch of crypto bros. Like there's a lot of thoughtful people in this space who are trying to do really good work that could, progress humanity forward. And it's a very big answer, but yeah, billionaires put their names on libraries, right? Like to sway public opinions and manage their reputation. And I think like Nouns is a reputation management opportunity for crypto as a whole.
I want to transition more into the core theme of season 7, which is creating content that's worth collecting. And if there's one community that has done it right and knows how to delegate capital to those who know how to create content worth collecting, it's Nouns. What Nouns has done, or I guess it's counterparts, it's capital receivers. I don't know what you guys call them in the community, but they've really amplified the Nouns meme. You are a prime example, and there's a bunch of other content either that was minted on Zora, that was distributed and went viral across crypto Twitter. It's just fascinating to see the high level of production and the memification around the Nouns, the noggles themselves, right? I want to talk about more of your cultural contribution because it's something that you you've done very, very well. It's the embed of the noggles, a physical pair of noggles into Rio's skating scene. Can you talk about that? It was one of the more beautiful collaborations that I've seen come out of the Nouns ecosystem, and something that always stuck with me as to, okay, this community is really different.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start by saying I had very little to do with that. I just set the environment that enabled ideas like that to flourish. But you know, and I try to lead by example so that people are inspired and they feel empowered. Hats off to the community from Brazil who are in Gnars. There's like 25% of our community are Brazilian. It's crazy penetration there, which is awesome. And you know, the likes of Bob Burnquist have gotten involved. So to have someone of like Tony Hawk level fame in skateboarding in our community is just insane to me. But to touch on the actual activation, one of our community members, Vlad, who's a pro skater, made a proposal to partner up with I Love 15, which is an organization in Rio that celebrates the legalization of skateboarding in Praça 15, which is this, you know, basically this town square in Rio, and it's got like European architecture. So there's actually like ledges to skate and stairs and all this sort of stuff. And back in the day, it was banned outright for people to skate. Like, so for many years they were protesting as a group, and there's amazing footage out there of you know, these huge protests where skateboarders are, you know, essentially fighting for their right to express themselves. And last year was the 10-year anniversary since they successfully, you know, had the laws change. And there were 1,000 skateboarders gathered into Praça 15, and then many more spectators. And in the lead up to this celebration and this collaboration, which, you know, was essentially a collaboration with Nouns as well, because we used some of the funding we received from them on this project. Only 6 ETH, by the way, and we built giant noggles. So a bunch of people in the community over there banded together. There was an architect who used his skills to design up these handrails that are affixed as the arms of a pair of Nouns glasses. And you can imagine them. They're just a giant pair of Nouns glasses on the ground, you know, maybe a bit over a foot high and like a few feet wide and a bit longer. And that, for in Australia we use metric, but anyway, the and the image that got around first on Twitter was basically a guy board sliding the arms of this pair of noggles, and it's just this really striking photo. And I shared it. It was something that came out immediately after the event, and it took off on Twitter. And, you know, I said, we do a little proliferation, and people finally started to get like what Gnars is about. Like it's a street culture movement built on top of Nouns as a protocol. And I think of Nouns as like this broader movement within crypto. And it's this opportunity for us to bring two cultures together, one that is completely unrelated to crypto and other than the ethos and the philosophies that I've sort of talked about previously. And then soon after that, a video came out that Nounish put together. Shout out to Goldie and 142 and their team. And basically they took all this content that the community had filmed and put into a Google Drive. They were literally terabytes of content, and edited together this brilliant short film. And it just sort of demonstrated what we did. And there's this crowd of people pushing these giant, you know, steel noggles into the town square. And it's filled with concrete, by the way. So the metal tubing is all filled with concrete, so it's impossible to steal it. And
no, that's no joke.
Yeah, they're there permanently along with other sculptures. There's like a giant skateboard. It's basically skatable art in this town square in Rio, and it's just beautiful. Gonna see them on Google Maps soon when they update the aerial photos.
I got to tell you, what a fun, creative, and unique way to take an object and place it in this environment that has its own unique energy, which then gives it its own unique life, right? And seeing the nouns glasses and the noggles in that setting was such a lively experience from my perspective. And shout out to that team, because they did a fantastic job editing that video and portraying sort of the excitement and the active energy in that setting, and how that really then amplified my feelings towards nouns. Like, I remember feeling a certain way, a different way about them. It's like, wow, this is actually so cool. What a cool way to do something and to showcase a brand in a really fun fashion that would otherwise be very mundane and very to a select few of people, you know, within across crypto Twitter and across Discords and a few like forums. And I commend you for that. And it taught me a lot of what happens when you take an otherwise mundane object, you know, that has a lot of familiarity within a niche group of people, and put it in specific environments that has a completely new energy to it. It elevates in a completely different way. I don't know. I'm like going all in on this because I really felt something special when I watched that video and when it came on my timeline randomly.
I'm stoked to hear that, because it's honestly something that a number of us draw on quite often to sort of demonstrate what Nouns is like outside of crypto. And it's like it's something that we're going to experiment with a hell of a lot more at Gnars because of the success of that event. And we onboarded hundreds of people into crypto as well. Well, I wasn't there personally, but the community did a fantastic job, and that it's sort of evolved into so many different things as well. So like now, you may have seen that we had another proposal that it was, in hindsight, it was a mistake. I was experimenting, but it failed. But essentially we want to scale out this effort where we're doing these activations. And the sort of the reasoning behind that is because we started off just sponsoring action sports people and saying, like, use this ETH to like buy flights on Travala, you can pay crypto and book hotel and go where you want to go and like attend that contest or make that film. And it was great. Like we had Joe Atkinson, who's 3-time world champion inline skating. He was the first to join us. And while it was so cool to see this individual go and win like the European championships and get up on the podium with his his merch on and see the noggles and him spraying the champagne everywhere, we loved that. But we came to realize that like it's much more impactful to empower an individual to like uplift their entire community. And that's where like physical public goods come into play. So we've experimented with refurbishing skate parks in different places and planning out these different events and opportunities to uplift different communities around the world. And it's crazy what impact you can have with like a really small budget in a developing country. So plenty more on the way, and just more and more crazy ideas every day in our community. So I'm really stoked about that.
It's incredibly inspiring and makes me wonder what's next for NounsDAO. What is next?
Well, what's next is in progress at the moment. About a week and a half ago, we, with the guys from Collective, so shout out Rocket Man and Hardy and your team, or their team, sorry, we put together a new platform called That's Gnarly. And so it's at that'sgnar.ly. And it's essentially a community curation platform where anyone with any social media account or content can actually bring their content over and have our community upvote their favorites. And we do a daily drop, which is an open edition. And we've had a really good run in this first week and a half just with our MVP of testing it out. And it's sort of painting this new picture of where a realization that we had with the giant Nouns glasses was after the event and the activation, the content just kept rolling in. And it's like this never-ending expression session. You know, it's a term derived from surfing that's pretty common in skating as well. You know, you have a contest, but then afterwards everyone just like goes ham and tries to do their best tricks and, you know, quote unquote, make history. And so we realized like people are still going to these glasses and throwing down their best trick and posting it on social media. Like, that's a really interesting outcome. And then we thought, what if we could incentivize people to do essentially that, but everywhere in the world, and have this like huge collective expression session that never ends? And fortunately, the guys from Collective were building this Revolution protocol where content creators can contribute content instead of funding to get governance rights in return. So everything that we do online, you know, at its core is media, because like we need to distribute it somehow. And That's Gnarly has become this, you know, this new seedling that's starting to grow from the ground. And we're starting to see like some big names skaters start to submit content on this platform, and snowboarders and skiers
Wow.
and motocross riders and everything. And once the MVP stage is good and we're happy with how it's working, we'll start to do outreach and onboard as many people as we can. And it's been so cool to see, you know, skaters and stuff that have been on the platform and just like submitted a cool video and then like walked away with $300 the next day. It's like, it's so cool. And the community love it because it's engaging and it gives us something to do that's a positive impact. So that's the immediate future. And then we're going to be going back to Nouns with a revised ask from our failed proposal, which was entitled Extremely Nounish. So we're going to go back with Extremely Nounish still. And the goal there is to do these activations all around the world and onboard more and more people to Web3 and the Nouniverse.
You brought up the keyword or phrase expression session. That's very unique. I haven't heard that phrase before. If you could attribute an analogy to better understand expression session, what would it be? Like, help me better decode that.
Yeah, it's like, I guess if you compared it to another sport, like say you were watching like basketball, right? And it's like at the end of the game, there's a winner and a loser, but they also pick out an MVP, right? And it's like, who was the player of the game essentially? And, you know, it was LeBron with that dunk that he did. That was insane, right? So that's like retroactively choosing a moment that made the day what it was. In action sports, they generally give everyone the opportunity to do that afterwards because it's very hard to land tricks consistently. So say in skateboarding, if you look at street league skateboarding, like you'll see people landing 20 tricks in a row, and that's just insane. Like that's super high level pro stuff, but they generally do a rehearsed set of maneuvers. It's like gymnastics in that way, where it's like, well, this is my routine and I've been practicing it for weeks and I'm going to nail it. But they're not the most impressive tricks. The most impressive tricks are the ones like you try 20 times and then when you land it, everyone goes insane. You know, so expression session is that realization of like, well, the game's over, but there's amazing stuff that could happen. So let's make history together. And everyone gets out there and they lay down the best trick that they can. And that's when you see like world firsts happen, where it's like, you know, you remember Tony Hawk landing the 900
Right.
Dave Bashinsky from our own community landing the first ever kickflip down El Toro 20 stair years ago, like 20 years ago. That is the idea of an expression session. It's those moments that make history.
I'm curious what you think the overlap between expression sessions and creating content worth collecting are. Any come to mind?
Yeah, it's actually like such a perfect analogy for it, because if I were to think about just any kind of content, like say it's even just a tweet, like it's you expressing yourself, and you generally sit down and put this effort into a tweet to hope that it would go viral, right? Like you want to do something that impacts enough people, and you might have different reasons. It might just be a meme and you want to make people laugh, or it might be a thought or a realization that you had that you think could help other people. And I think in terms of like expression session, it's the same thing. It's just a different medium through which you express yourself. And I think when it comes to, content worth collecting, I think if there's something that reaches you as an individual and touches you in a certain way that changes who you are, or makes you laugh, or makes you smile, or makes you cry, whatever it is, like that's a memento, that to me, that's worth collecting, just for the very fact that it impacted me in some small way. So, yeah, expression session, it's a big one for the crypto community. You should latch onto it.
Listen, this conversation has been really eye-opening. Really cool to hear a more in-depth perspective, Gami, of your entire journey, from skateboarding, raising funds, to buying that now and entering the community, finding your voice, very much so, creating cultural relevance across URL and IRL experiences. I'm really glad we had this conversation. Thank you for being on. Before we wrap it up, where can we find you, Gami? Where can we learn more about NounsDAO and everything in between?
So in terms of getting this message across properly, I'm going to use an American accent because, like I mentioned at the start, so many people misspell Gnars because of my Aussie accent. So the best place to go to learn about Gnars is Gnars.com. And to join Gnars, you go to Gnars.wtf. And that I also have a link page up at gna.rs. So that's just Gnars, one word with the dot before the RS. Yeah, everything on Twitter is at Gami, which my handle is 0xigami. And that's probably all you need to know.
Gami, you're the man. Thank you for being a part of season 7. I really look forward to the next conversation we have, but till next time.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you so much.